Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Immutable Destiny.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, fine, thanks. And you, welcome at my channel.
Yep.
So we agreed to have an informal chat about abiogenesis.
Yep. Oh, what fun.
Okay, so I did send you, I can put that on the screen, just a moment.
Yeah, I think you can.
About information, which of course is an essential aspect which requires an explanation. How about how the first information system emerged prebiotically? Because of course you need the information system in place in order to have life, to start life.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if that appears. Okay, here. Chance to find a message written on a cloud in the sky, like Jesus loves you, randomly, is as DNA creating its own software and upon it, writing a complex algorithm to make a protein by accident.
Yeah, I would disagree with that. There's several assumptions that are nested there that don't hold up.
Okay, let's elucidate them.
Yeah, I mean, the first assumption is that, if you consider things in isolation, sure, that might be the case, but there's tons of things that are happening prebiotically, among which there's millions of peptides that are being generated. And to me, it seems likely that there's some peptides that have affinity towards DNA and some that have affinity in terms of catalyzing DNA's replication.
Well, first you need to have RNA and DNA. That would be, in my understanding, the first huge origin of life problem. I've made a video on the origin of RNA.
Yeah, I've seen several. I've both read several videos and several articles that document various synthetic routes that can be used to accomplish the synthesis of DNA.
Yeah, this is an assertion which I've not seen yet. Explanation which seem to me compelling, and the big abiogenesis problem is the selection problem, and also the fact that molecules, they do not complexify by themselves, they devolve. And we have scientific papers like from Steve Benner, which makes that very clear. And I can put it on the screen, and we can read what he says about that problem.
Yeah, the thing is that life doesn't contradict the second law, nor do biological or chemical systems.
That's problem. Let me just find the quote and put it here on the screen. We can have a read on it. Just a moment, please. I think that is, besides the sequence problem of having a first genome with the right sequence, the problem to have stabilization of the molecules and actually make them, that is, in my understanding, an abiogenesis killer, literally.
I don't see it that way necessarily. It's a matter of having the right, peptide and molecules that have the right activity, which.
Okay, he writes here, in Paradoxes in the Origin of Life, the asphalt paradox: systems given energy and left to themselves devolve to give useless. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Devolve to give useless complex mixtures, asphalts. The literature reports, to our knowledge, exactly 0 confirmed observations where replication involving replicable imperfections, evolution, emerged spontaneously from a devolving chemical system. It is impossible for any non-living chemical system to escape devolution, to enter into the Darwinian world of the living. Such statements of impossibility apply even to macromolecules not assumed to be necessary for RI or I evolution. So he is very clear on that. And there is another science paper which says decomposition of monomers, polymers, and molecular systems, an unresolved problem. And both monomers and polymers can undergo a variety of decomposition reactions that must be taken into account because biologically relevant molecules would undergo similar decomposition processes in the prebiotic environment.
So if the asphalt problem does exist, it may exist only under the conditions by which those molecules are being generated. And again, there's other means by which those molecules can be generated. And no, LPP, I'm not saying it's not possible without an intelligent agency. I'm just saying it hasn't been demonstrated that an intelligent agency is even possible to do that yet. So,
well, I mean, if you want to go into that argument, which is actually one which Matt Dillahunty makes, which claims that God is logically not possible. I mean, is that what you are claiming, Immutable?
I'm not claiming that argument now, but I can make it and I can defend it.
No, the question is if that is a sound argument to claim that a creator is logically not possible.
It depends on the creator you're describing. There's certain creators that definitely are plausible, but there's some that are not.
Okay. My description of a creator on the bottom of reality would be simply a spirit, an intelligent designer, which has the power to bring forward all the contingent things like the universe and life and biodiversity, which has this power. That is a principio my description of that creator. I'm not going into further descriptions, like, of course, you know that I am a Christian, so I believe in the Christian God. But in a cumulative argument, the first description of that causal agency would be that he is an intelligent designer. Just that.
Okay, so a further question about what you were describing. Would you describe the this intelligent agent, I don't really care what you want to call it, but would you say that this intelligent agent is something that's manifest in the physical world, or is it something that's transcendent to the physical world?
Now it is transcendent, but I believe that that creator became human through Jesus Christ, so he has the ability to enter the physical world.
Okay, so it's something that's beyond nature, but that interacts with the physical.
I think that God still interacts in the sense that God knows everything. He is transcendent and he is everywhere. He has knowledge of everything that happens in the creation. And I believe that he also answers prayers. So I think that he interacts with his creation as well. Yes.
Okay, but so I guess the question I would have then is, how would you, what litmus test would you be using to determine if the God you profess to have belief in is actually interacting or not?
I think that we are going into personal experiences. If you make
I think this is actually like completely relevant, like to the evidentiary approach. If you're saying God is something that's interacted with the world prior, I mean, the Genesis account and other accounts directly state that. And now you're saying, okay, God is also interacting with the world in some other way. That's fine. I just need to know what the criteria, what type of things would I be looking for that would indicate to me, oh, yes, that is in fact the Christian God that's interacting with this world, and it's not Vishnu or any of the other gods that are, claimed to be gods.
That would be a more accurate definition of precisely which God that I believe in. And since I am a Christian, there was recently, I think it was Saturday, the debate of Smokey and John Maddox on MTD's channel about the Christian God and what evidences the Christian God. And of course, that would be then a completely different line of arguments and reasoning to justify why the Christian God is the most likely one and not the God of the Muslims or other religions. But that would be an entirely different topic. What we were discussing is if a creator is logically possible. And I see absolutely no reason why an intelligent designer at the bottom of reality, a necessary being, is logically not plausible or possible.
I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm saying that
Okay.
if there is, my particular claim is that if there is an intelligent designer, be it outside of nature, be it in nature, be it whatever, right? The only way and the only assumptions we can make about that designer that we can potentially know are that that designer would have had to interact physically within the world, and thus most plausibly is a physical agent within the universe.
Well, I think that God, he of course is the creator of all the physical universe. But since that is an event which happened in the past, we have no time machine to go back and observe what happened. So what we have is circumstantial evidence. We have the created world, and we can reason and make philosophy, and we have science, and based on that we can make post-predictions which give us hints in regards of what most likely happened back then, if there was an intelligence, a designer involved in creating the world or not.
Well, sure. I mean, and the thing is, I don't think that the explanation of there being, it depends. I suppose it depends how you argue it. So some arguments, like if you're trying to use, for instance, the prime mover argument, I think it fails in the sense that if you assume that there's something which is an unmoved mover, right, the issue lies within the assumption being made. Because the purpose of the unmoved mover argument is to say that things of lower complexity originate from a source of higher complexity, because something that's more complex can build something that's less complex. And it continues, but it seems to generate an infinite paradox in the sense that you seem to keep requiring an explanation on top of an explanation, top of an explanation, top of yada, 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 yada. And you never seem to draw the line there. And if you do, by saying, okay, there's something which is fundamental, there's something that you can't go any further. This is something, this thing called God is something which is the most fundamental aspect of our reality. It doesn't seem unwarranted then for a person who's arguing from a materialist position to say, okay, fine, I can accept that. Although I can also say that there are certain principles, there are certain like natural laws and principles that are just fundamental, that trying to ask what they mean or trying to justify them further is nonsensical.
Okay, in regards of your first point, that the creator would have to be more complex than the physical world that he brought forward. This is an objection which I hear very often. It is not new to me. And the answer to that is that God as a spirit, he is not made of physical parts, which would...
No, hold on. It's not that God has to be more complex than the world he designs. It's that in general, right? Whatever the thing that's created is, right? So the world, the thing that created it, so its designer, its creator, is more complex than it, according to the prime mover argument.
Well, that's precisely what I addressed now, Immutable, that God as a spirit, he is not made of physical parts, and in that sense, he is not complex. As a spirit is a very simple entity, but that doesn't mean that he cannot imagine complex things.
Well, sure, but that raises another question of, okay, if this thing is a spiritual entity, it has no physical substrate, how does it manage to create the universe?
Yeah, that's a big question as well, which we do not have an answer. And for example, if you think, well, I want to move my arm now, then the interface spirit and the neurons, which then direct that command to the arm to move the arm, That interface, how that works, that is an unknown. We do not know how it works, but we know that it does work by experience.
Yeah, I want to address something logical, plausible, probable just said in the live chat. If everything in the material universe requires a cause, why is it logical that something must exist outside the universe?
Wait. This is another fallacy which is very common. Not everything requires a cause, but everything that begins to exist requires a cause. Since God is eternal, he had no beginning, so he does not require a cause.
Well, right. There's a second way to respond to that as well, which is that there are things in the universe which do not have causes. Quantum mechanics and certain phenomenon therein do not have causes for their.
Well, I disagree with that, immutable. I mean, virtual particles, they require a quantum vacuum, and then you have to ask, where did that quantum vacuum come from? So you don't avoid the problem of cause with virtual particles.
Quantum fields and quantum fields and things that interact with them are things that exist. Those are things.
Yeah, but said they require a quantum vacuum, and then you have to ask, where did that come from?
Yeah, a quantum vacuum is just a particular state of a quantum field.
Yeah, again, but you're required to explain where it came from. It doesn't come from nothing.
No, the thing is, right, when you're describing quantum vacuum particularly, it's a particular state of that field.
Okay, where did that state come from?
Where did that state come from?
Yeah.
It's a random state.
Excuse me?
It's a random state.
Yeah, but where did it is random? Okay, but where did it come from? That state is not absolutely nothing. It is something.
Yeah, it is something. It's a state that happens to exist among states that are allowable.
Okay, but what caused that state into being?
Nothing. Nothing caused it. What it means?
Can nothing do something?
What do you mean by do something?
Well, what is nothing? Absolutely, in a philosophical sense, absolutely nothing is the absence of anything. It is the opposite of something. And of course, if absolutely nothing would have been at the beginning, since it has no causal potentialities, there would still be absolutely nothing.
Right, except for we're describing events that are occurring within quantum fields. We're not describing nothing. Nothing is
exactly. But I'm coming back to my point, immutable. You need to have an explanation about these quantum fields. What generated them? They cannot pop up out of absolutely nothing.
Quantum fields are allowed to exist. They don't require anything other than saying there's a quantum field which has particular properties, and there's things which interact with that quantum field.
Again, did they come from nothing? What caused these quantum fields?
Nothing causes them. They simply exist. It's like asking the question, Otangello, what causes space and time?
So you would claim that these quantum fields have always existed without a beginning?
Yes, they are something which are eternal. They are something which are fabrics of the universe.
Okay, so do these quantum fields exist in time or outside of time?
They exist in time.
Okay, if they exist in time, then they cannot be without a beginning immutable, because
no, not true.
Well, let me explain. The smallest unit of time is Planck time.
Yeah.
And if you start counting, let's suppose you start counting from that moment from now on, you will add Planck time units one after the other.
Right. Okay? So the issue is that Planck is something. So the issue, I know where you're going with this, is that Planck time is something which describes something after the Big Bang, right? The thing is, time exists eternally in the past.
That is your claim, but that's precisely what I think is logically not possible.
Well, then you're rejecting general relativity.
Well, I was just making the point that when you start to add one section of time, you can take the smallest one, Planck time, one after the other.
Angela, let me cut to the heart of this question specifically. Do you think that, like, when we're describing this moment about Planck time, right? Do you think that there is a proper interval by which we can say past from future in terms of what we know about the nature of space and time?
Well, Planck time describes a period of time. It's the smallest unit of time, and if as soon as you have a change and you have units of time, then you have to when you add them up and then stop, then the interval from where you started until where you stopped, that is a finite period of time.
Right. The issue being is that that time that we're describing doesn't describe a tense. That time.
I know where you want to go with that. I had.
Well, we're discussing.
Let me explain to you. I had recently. You were present when Leo brought that up. That time is tenseless, and that would presuppose the theory of the B theory of time. Okay, so he claims that that is a proven fact that time is tenseless, and I have not studied that, so I cannot give you an opinion in regards of that. And I also don't understand the math. I'm very bad in mathematics, so I will go into something which I will not be qualified to give you an opinion. So that is for me up to the moment an open question, which I will study, and then I will try to either agree or disagree based on what I will study.
Well, okay, sure. So I mean, let me assume for a moment that, well, I won't push the conversation any further because the question about the A theory of time and the B theory of time are quite involved. But
yeah,
I assume from the conversation you're operating under the A theory of time, right?
Yes. I believe that the A theory of time is correct. It's more plausible, let's say.
Okay, so my question would be, if the arguments you use, right, require the A theory of time to be true, and the A theory of time is in fact not correct, right? If the B theory of time happens to turn up true, would it not also be the case that the arguments that you're using, which are contingent upon the A theory of time, no longer are relevant?
Yeah, that would be possible.
Right. And so under my framework, like, because I'm holding to the B theory of time, and I think that's the case because what I know about general relativity, that, like, what you're describing in terms of proper intervals and things needing to have cause before and after, the language of before and after, when you're describing the fundamental aspects of space and time, don't make sense.
Yeah, that is another problem which has often been brought up. How could God create in a moment where there was no time? But Craig, he gives a reply to that, and he says that causation, the moment of causation can be where the cause and the effect operate at the same mutually at the same time, at the same moment, and that at the moment when God triggered the Big Bang, then cause and effect were operating simultaneously, and that would solve the problem that there was no time involved at that moment. There was just a transition from a timeless dimension to a dimension in time when time started.
Yeah, that's completely. Yeah, that's. I won't go into it. I'll let Leo handle that conversation at a different date. But that Craig is well known to have rejected the general relativity in favor of his own beliefs.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, I have a basic understanding on these topics, and mostly based on what I have learned from Craig. But I'm open to go deeper into that and to study what is involved, and if there is really a B theory of time which makes sense, which with tenseless time, if that is plausible. And if it is, I have no problem. I told to Leo, if that is plausible, then I want to be as much unbiased as possible and permit the evidence to lead wherever it is. And if it does indeed lead to that direction, then well, fine.
Yeah. So let's see. I don't know how I got on this tangent. That was a little fun though. I like talking about astronomy and cosmology when the opportunity arises.
I think at this moment, Immutable, what is important that we can, I think, agree that an intelligent designer or power at the bottom of reality is not logically impossible. So it is one of the two options which we have to explain reality and the physical world. Either there was a creator involved in creating the physical universe, or it was not. That are the two options. That is the framework upon which an investigation has to start in regards of origins.
Yeah. Let me ask this question then. So, irregardless of whether or not, like, a designer does or does not exist, if we're observing something, I mean, if me and you are walking down a beach, for instance, and we hear a noise or we see something in the sand, and we're trying to determine, all right, what was that noise, or is this character that's inscribed in the sand something that's naturally formed, or something that's created by is it something that's natural, or is it something that's been clearly crafted by a person, right?
Mm-hmm. That is a very fundamental question and a very important one, Mute.
Yeah.
In order for us to come to meaningful conclusions, since we have a framework to work upon, which is either there are signs of intelligence observable that acted in the past to create the world, or not, or everything is based on random occurrences without guidance, then the next question which we would have to ask, what are the signs of intelligent action, and what are the things that we know that only intelligence can do, which random non-intelligent mechanisms are not capable and impotent to instantiate?
Well, let me ask the other question, right? Which is, so for instance, let me approach this from a different angle, which is that when I look at something like a character in the sand, or hearing something that it makes a crashing sound or whatever, the question that we should be asking about in terms of, was this thing natural, or was this thing something that we know to be natural, is in terms of seeking an explanation about that thing. So for instance, if there's a character in the sand that I don't recognize and that you don't recognize, what I might begin doing is thinking about, okay, so I know we're near a beach, I know that there's erosion, I know that there's animal life that happens to be in the sea, and there's some animals that happen to live nearby. Does the specific pattern of the print, or the specific pattern of what we see in the sand, does that match anything? Does that have any semblance to anything that exists nearby or in the natural world? And you might look around and you might say, no, it doesn't. Okay, but what about other humans that have been living here, right? Or that might have the island. You can see where this is going, right? And that what we should be trying to do is trying to seek out explanations that can account for that behavior before we jump to this idea that before we come to this notion that, okay, it must have been something which is designed, something which is quite obviously which is quite obviously been manufactured and is not something that naturally would occur.
Yes. And I have a topic at my library exactly in regards of that issue, Immutable, and I am listing 10 things that I think can be recognized as clear product of intelligent action, which unguided random mechanisms would not be able to instantiate. If you want, we can go through.
Yeah, sure. I can go through
one by one.
Sure. So let's go through the first one.
Okay. Implementing things based on regular behavior, order, mathematical rules, laws, principles, physical constants, and logic gates.
Right. So, for instance, the first thing you named, regular behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
If something doesn't conform to a regular behavior or semi-regular behavior, right? That would mean that there's no discernible way that we can really tell what that thing is by definition, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there wasn't some kind of regularity in that event, if there wasn't any kind of regularity at all, we wouldn't be able to determine that thing as being as being potentially caused by something. So for me, that seems to be okay, fine. There are in fact natural laws, there are natural principles that can account for orderly behavior. They're not always perfect, but you can tell the general principle from observations. Mathematical, let's see, behavior, order. For me, order becomes a very specific type of thing. It's a matter of trying to figure out if something is actually ordered in a precise way, or does it appear to be ordered, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's certain, like for instance, if you've gone to a museum and you've looked at a painting, like that's abstract art, if you look at it long enough, right, you can begin to see, your eyes will begin to form and kind of isolate certain structures in the painting that that might not have any significant meaning, but because you've been looking, they now associate that to, well, that looks like a plane, or that looks like a car, even though nothing of the sort is regularly discernible.
Mm-hmm.
So order is something that I'm not sure you can readily discern. I think that's something that needs to be more careful. Mathematical rules, laws, principles. So first of all, the question I would have in trying to answer that is, are those rules and laws and principles something which are prescriptive to the phenomenon, or something which are descriptive?
They are prescriptive. I can give an example. For example, the rules to play chess, and they are instantiated by someone which invented these rules, and then we play chess based on these rules. So they are the product of someone which invented them. That would be prescriptive rules. Okay.
Okay. Okay. To give a different example, right? And you can try this at home. Say, for instance, you have a six-sided die, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are laws of probability which tell you, for instance, that there is a 1 in 6 chance that you will roll, a 1, for instance. Doesn't matter which particular. And it tells you that as you, for instance, keep going through the stages of throwing and recording the value that the dice lands on, that you will have essentially an equal distribution of each. But it doesn't always turn out to be perfect. It turns out to be usually asymptoting towards those values. It's the idea of something like a dice being thrown as random means that, okay, there's certain variables that, you might have 5,999, if you're doing heads and tails, okay, you might have 2,499 heads and, however many remaining tails. So I wouldn't say that that's prescriptive, right? Something being prescriptive means that when you have a law, right, something has to obey it, right? It means that,
correct, yes,
for every implementation of that variable, there is a prefixed outcome. Whereas when we use mathematical rules to describe something, oftentimes what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, here's a set of things that we can measure and that appear to have a relationship to each other. But how well does this mathematical relationship apply to this data? Because sometimes it applies very well, but sometimes it does not. So I'm not sure it's prescriptive necessarily. I would say it's inherently a descriptive process.
Well, I would say that, for example, we need to have a universe which is orderly and which behaves always based on that order. Otherwise, we would not even able to exist in this universe. It would be chaotic. And in order to have that order, you need to have mathematical laws, like the physical laws. They need to be implemented in order to have an orderly universe. So the question of yeah.
So the question is, why wouldn't those things be able to arise naturally? Right? Why is it required the system needs to?
Well, because they work based on mathematical rules, which we have figured out, like the laws of thermodynamics and so forth. The question is, why does matter behave based on mathematical laws and rules at all? There is no requirement this to be so.
Can I give an example of combining two, let's say, two rules that would create an order system? So, an example of rolling heads or tails, or throwing a die and or not. Sorry, my mind's all over the place today. Of flipping a coin and having it represent and having it land either heads or tails, right? Mm-hmm. So there's 50-50 each time.
Okay.
But so for some reason, we have a rule that there's a mathematical description that you throw a head, that you flip a coin, it lands heads or tails. Okay, fine. But let me also implement a rule that if the result you've rolled is heads, right? Mm-hmm. That object stays in place. But if the object you've rolled is tails, re-roll, right? Reflip the coin, essentially repeat the event, right?
Okay.
You have a two very simple set of rules. So you have one set of rules that describes the outcome of states, and you have another rule which says if there is one specific result, something happens to it. If there is another specific result, something else which is distinct from the first event happens to it. Right? And out of that,
that would be you describing what is happening, but that does not describe. You've not implemented rules or mathematical principles which direct the outcome upon which the thing that you achieve behaves. And that's precisely what you don't need to nature. But go ahead.
Well, the thing is, right, the reason I brought that up is if you go back to chemistry, for instance, it depends what chemical you're talking about, but there are certain classes of chemicals that are susceptible towards certain reactions, and they decay. That's natural. It happens. But there are other chemicals which, in the same environment, are perfectly stable. They're perfectly happy being there, and they last, hundreds of thousand times longer in terms of their ability to stay.
Okay.
In the point there being is that even if you do have a random assortment of basic chemicals, say carbon dioxide and nitrogen and sorts of stuff like that,
mm-hmm.
What seems to be the case is that by very basic chemical reactions occurring, you're going to generate essentially a very, very large, a very large swath of chemicals, but some of them inherently based upon the structures they have. Some are going to be more stable in some environments, and some are going to be less stable. And so, according to those rules, as you begin to allow time to continue on, what begins to happen is you'll see a predomination of certain types of compounds over others.
Okay.
Right. Now, the other thing is trying to reconcile that with also thermodynamics. So what thermodynamics says, and thermodynamics isn't really relevant until you start reaching cells, but thermodynamics tends to favor reactions which are which give off energy to the environment, essentially. So if an environment isn't spontaneous, if it doesn't give off energy to its environment in some way, if it takes more energy to bake a cake than to get a cake, you won't have a cake. It's kind of a very, very basic way of putting it. So in that way, you have, again, a still really large set of chemicals, which is restricted. And like with what Dimiter's proposing in terms of his RNA peptide kind of model, they're very basic interactions that you can propose between say RNA and a short peptide that's not very long, 3 to 5, maybe even 7 amino acids in length. And these interactions that these two molecules have, they're not actually bonding with each other, but it can catalyze some type of basic form of essentially some basic form of metabolism. And that process can continue. And you have another selection process based upon the affinity and reactivity of those processes. So to me, it seems like it's perfectly rational to kind of invoke or to think about it this way.
Well, the thing is that that first point about mathematical laws relates to the origin of the physical laws. And
they wouldn't, so the origin of the physical laws, they don't have, those are also, I would reject the point that they have an origin, I guess is my point.
Yeah, what I think is immutable, and this guy here wrote that up in the 60s. He wrote an article and he said that actually it seems more natural to suppose that the physical universe and the laws of physics are interdependent.
Sure.
This is a very, very important point which he makes here. That means that you cannot have a physical universe without the implementation of the laws which govern the physical universe, and atoms and subatomic particles and entropy and so forth. So, but at the same time, you cannot have physical laws if you do not have physics, if you do not have the physical world, because there would nothing to be for them to be implemented on.
Sure. I mean, I think the type of thing he seems to be describing isn't really relevant with the field of abiogenesis. It's more relevant when you're talking about.
Yes. No, I have put that in regards of mathematical laws, immutable, okay, in relation to the physical laws. That was actually the intention why I mentioned that. Okay?
Yeah. So let's see. The thing is, like much in the case that you're not comfortable discussing A theory and B theory of time, this is a conversation where I can't contribute very much. Because unfortunately, I will give an answer to your question, but I'll preface it by saying it's still kind of on the hot seat of science. The best theories or the best ideas we have to deal with that kind of problem, this problem about how do is there a way mathematically to generate a set of consistent rules that will essentially build a universe?
Well, that is actually what the case is. What we know that the physical laws, they are implemented in order for our universe to work orderly. That is the evidence, and we try to figure out how was that substantiated.
Right. So the particular question is tended to be answered by things like string theory and string field theory. And those are topics that they're extremely nuanced and hard to explain. And unfortunately, they are still being developed. So
okay, so I think we can move forward, because I think we both are at this time on a certain limit. But what I would like to leave here as a point of importance is that upon my understanding, the mathematical rules, they can only be implemented and substantiated when there is something upon which they can be applied to. And that is what we see, that mathematical rules, they are implemented. The physical laws, they dictate how the physical universe works. And, and that is an interdependence where both have to be there. The mathematical rules have to be there, have to be implemented, and also the physical world upon which these rules act. So both require an explanation. So we can put the question to elucidate this further, maybe for another chat. And I will, on my side, try to dwell a little bit more into B theory of time if tenseless time is substantiated, like Leo asserts, and then we can eventually go further in regards of that issue.
Yeah, so I think another kind of important point there to make is that when we're talking philosophically about worldviews or philosophical systems that are that we're trying to use to describe the world, there's certain what are called axioms. There's certain things that we must assume about, that we must kind of essentially take at face value and use them as launching platforms for conversations.
Yes.
So mine would be that the laws of logic, but also that certain things which exist, right? So for me, I would say that space, time, and matter and energy are things that are built into the universe. But to me, you're asking about laws, for instance. To me, I would answer the question in saying that, so the question being, how exactly do these laws form? Where do they come from?
That's the crux of the question, really, immutable.
Yeah. So my answer to that would be, these laws, quote unquote, that we're developing to try and answer these questions are descriptive of interactions between matter, certain types of matter and certain types of energy in the universe.
Well, we describe, of course, what we have observed, what we discovered. But at the same time, I don't think it is a question of either one or the other. It is not just a question of, are they described or prescribed? I think they are both. We describe them, but they have to be prescriptive and implemented, and matter behaves upon the instruction or implementation of these laws.
Well, let's be careful with that, and I would say that for this reason, right? When you say, for instance, right, if I say I throw a ball and it's prescriptively true, right? It must be true. It's prescribed to be the case that that ball will fall, right, due to gravity. When I make that type of statement, right, there must be something about what I've described that makes it the case, like that mandates that phenomenon to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It means that there is something necessary about what's being described, that the law that comes from it, or the law that accompanies it.
Well, that is the crux of the question. If it is physically necessary that something behaves orderly in the way as we observe it, or not. And once you can instantiate and observe that it is not necessary, then you have to ask, well, if it is not necessary, where did that law come from?
Well, the thing is, right, if I ask you, Otangello, is it possible for you to conceive of a world where when you throw a ball, it does not fall? Well, the answer can be, yeah. I can imagine a world where, I throw a ball and it just completely launches into space. Hello?
Of course, we can have other values of the strength of gravity or other forces, and then of course everything will behave in a different manner upon that these different.
Well, ignore gravity for a moment, right? There could be, for instance, there could be a universe where gravity doesn't exist, right? There could be a universe like in a set of laws describing.
I don't know if there can be a universe where gravity doesn't exist. How do you explain the expansion of the universe and the precise cosmological and so forth?
Well, that's the thing, right?
So don't have gravity, so
well, that's the thing. Right?
So very finely tuned in order for us to be here and have this discussion. So
that's the thing, right? One of the cute things about that kind of statement is, for instance, I can imagine a world where the gravitational constant might be 0, right? So for all intents and purposes, gravity doesn't exist. It doesn't interact at all with massive objects. But the thing is that as a consequence of that, there are certain structures which won't be able to form. You won't have planets, you won't have black holes, you won't have
yeah, it will be a completely different universe, or eventually I don't have in mind now what precise consequences would be if the gravitational force would not be exactly what it is. But what we know is that it would have dramatic consequences. I guess now, I'm not sure, but I think life would not be possible without the gravitational force to be precisely what it is.
Well, sure, but the question is, like, for instance, okay, gravitation is kind of an obvious one. But another question you could ask, and for me, like as a chemist, it's kind of interesting as well. If you were to change, say, the effect or the strength of, say, the electromagnetic force, right? So the Coulombic force between charged particles. Could you have a universe where that constant is, say, different by 1/1 trillionth of its original value? Maybe. That's a little hard to say.
Well, I've made an entire video on the electromagnetic forces. It's at my other channel, where I demonstrate how many things that must be just right in regards of these forces in order for us to be here. And it's phenomenal. It is really inspiring.
So like you were mentioning, what you were mentioning earlier, right? The fact that so for instance, if I alter the electromagnetic force and the electromagnetic force only, that might have dire consequences. However, if I were to change the electromagnetic force in a particular way, along with the strength of the strong nuclear and weak nuclear force, that might not have as much of an effect as long as I alter them in the correct proportions. And this is the same type of analogy, for instance, as saying there's multiple ways to make a chocolate cake. I mean, you can add different amounts of milk, you can add different amounts of chocolate and eggs and stuff like that. Okay, that's fine. But you're not always going to end up like with the same type of chocolate cake. There's going to be different like consistencies and different properties that those cakes have as the result of how much of each material you've used to build it.
Okay, I have here multi-fine tuning. Let me read that to you. Most analysis of the fine tuning of the force strengths and constants of nature, only one parameter is adjusted at a time to make the problems more tractable. This would correspond to changing one dial at a time on our universe-creating machine, while leaving the other dials unchanged. Even taken individually, each of these examples of fine-tuning is impressive. But in the real universe, the values of all constants and force strengths must be satisfied simultaneously to have a universe hospitable to life. So I think this increases the problem of fine-tuning exponentially.
Let me read that again because I was having.
Read it again.
Let's see. Each of these examples is going to address the real universe, the values of all gets on. Yeah, that's the thing is, I think I initially the last part of that. Each taken individually, each of these examples of fine-tuning is impressive, but in the real universe, the values of all the constant forces must be satisfied simultaneously. How so, right? The way we claim fine-tuning in the universe is because we exist. Although, for instance, if there was a universe where, say, the electromagnetic force were 1/1 trillionth of its original strength, they'd be claiming the exact same thing, right? Which that would mean that there is more than one possible state for these constants to occupy that does generate life. So in this, it's not necessarily trivial, but doesn't need to be this specific. But it also seems to imply that there's a way in which those constants can be, a way in which these constants can be tampered with or modified in order to accommodate the phenomenon of life.
Let me read the follow-up, which I think clarifies this huge problem, immutable. John Gribbin and Martin Rees reach a similar conclusion. If we modify the value of one of the fundamental constants, something invariably goes wrong, leading to a universe that is inhospitable to life as we know it. When we adjust a second constant in the attempt to fix the problem, the result generally is to create 3 new problems for every one that we solve. The conditions in our universe really do seem to be uniquely suitable for life forms like ourselves, and perhaps even for any form of organic chemistry.
Yep, looks like my mic muted itself. That's a little annoying.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I don't know exactly how many fine-tuned constants there are out there, immutable, but I think there are 260. Let me check here. I think I have that here at the first page. Let me check here.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it is here. 300, Codata lists about 360 different fine-tuned constants, which have to be just right in order to have a life-permitting universe. Now, of course, that is a huge problem for someone that proposes that unguided natural mechanisms instantiate all these fine-tuned constants randomly. How do you think that is likely? I mean, if we take only the cosmological constant, which is finely tuned in 1 to 10 to the 123rd power, which you and me, we cannot even grasp or fathom or imagine the hugeness of that number and fine-tuning. And that's just one of 360, which just must be right. And I mean, then we can go further and look at the Earth. If there was no moon, there would be no life. If there was no atmosphere as ours, there would be no life. If there was no water, there would be no life. If the Earth would not have the right angle of 23.5 degrees, then the seasons would be not like how they are. If the variation of that angle would be much larger, there would be no life. And I can go on and on and on. And my point, immutable, is that in my understanding, this is absolutely astonishing evidence that there had to be a fine-tuner which had foresight and knew exactly what had to be done in order to have a life-permitting universe and planet Earth.
It could be the case, right? I'm not fully against it. It's just I would need evidence that's indicative towards that claim.
Well, the evidence is the fine-tuning immutable. We have all these constants which must be right, and they are right. That is the evidence. And
So
that requires an explanation. Why is it so? It didn't have to be so. There is no physical necessity that the moon has exactly the distance and size and everything which is required in order to have planet Earth being able to host life. There was no necessity for that, but it is so, and that requires an explanation.
So the first thing I'll mention is that the 360 constants you're naming, I'm not sure exactly what they are.
I can open
It's
the- I
no,
can-
I don't need to know. The point being therein is that some of those I can guarantee are going to be the result of mathematical formulations, which are fine. Okay, those are required to be the case because of the mathematical laws that constrain them. However, certain other constants, for instance, one of them being, for instance, what's called the fine structure constant, is the result of, I believe it's 3 to 4 other different constants. So
yes, which gives you the 1 to the 137th. There have been written books on that, and that's absolutely amazing. If you go into that, and it's beautiful. I mean, these laws, they are not only amazing because they permit life to exist, but if you I've not done it, but those that have written books on it, they say these mathematical formulas and laws, they are beautiful. They demonstrate beauty, and of course you have to ask, where does that come from, if not one has invented them?
Well, so my response to that is that mathematical laws, right, their formulation is self-sufficient. So whether or not a person has developed mathematical law, a mathematical law will still be true by virtue of its premises being true, right? It doesn't require anything else to intervene with it. Now, humans can create new mathematical laws and develop and derive different things. That's fine. But the process of mathematics, which is a descriptive language, it doesn't need any input. The set of laws that we describe.
Well, the thing is that you can invent mathematical laws or also mathematical formulas. As I brought up the example of chess, you invent the rules upon which someone afterwards plays chess. These rules, they are not simply existing somewhere and we discover them and describe them. They are invented by intelligence, which enforces them into the game. And upon these laws, the game is played. So we know that someone has invented the rules upon which chess is played. And that is exactly what we see in the universe. The matter and the physical universe works based on these rules, on these mathematical laws, which have been instantiated. It wouldn't have to be so at all. And that is precisely the point where we have to ask, can simply matter and physical things instantiate physical laws? And I would say no. I would say this is powerful evidence that intelligence, which can do so, has instantiated them and has enforced them for the universe to work as it does in a perfectly orderly manner and stable for billions of years in order for life to be able to exist in the universe.
So to bring your example of chess, right? There's it's a ridiculous number. It's like 10 to the 500 or whatever the hell it is. There's a certain number of chess games that can be played. And that's because, for instance, like you mentioned, there are certain rules of chess. There are certain pieces which have different functions. And there's a certain space, so to speak, in which those pieces are allowed to interact and continue to interact over time. But the set of rules, like all possible set of allowable games in chess, so to speak, are defined perfectly by those rules and interactions, right? The universe, in a much similar way, there's certain rules that we've discovered about it, which is that For instance, the strength of an electric field dissipates as you keep increasing distance. The gravitational force behaves similarly with distance. And these rules are interesting. They generate their own set of constants and what have you. But the rules that we notice with these phenomenon give rise to other things. So some of these rules, when you combine them, explain how crystals can form and other interesting little phenomenon. But nothing about crystals phenomenon, like crystals being formed, needs to be explained by a new principle. It can be used by a combination of other principles.
Yeah, I mean, in regards of that, of course, the physical laws which permit these reactions, they are already instantiated. But in regards of the origin of the universe, we have to start from the point that there were no physics, there was no matter, there were no atoms, there were no space, there were no time, there was anything. And suddenly all this came into existence, but behaving upon these physical laws. And otherwise, there would be just, I mean, I don't even know if it was possible to start anything without the instantiation right from the beginning of these laws.
Well, for instance, I mean, I can imagine a set of rules, like for instance, during the beginning or very, very early part of the universe, in so much to say that several moments after the Big Bang, let's say for a moment the constants are generated randomly. Okay, fine. It could be that in one particular universe, the gravitational constant is just far too strong.
But you had no universe yet, immutable. You need to start from the point that there was nothing physical to enforce any physical laws upon.
Well, that's not my belief. So my belief, like I said earlier, right, is that what I take as axioms are that number one, is it still working?
No, I'm hearing you.
No, my screen flickered for a moment, so that was interesting. But so my set of axioms are that time and space are things which are fundamental to the universe, but also matter and energy are the same thing. So those are two things which also are fundamental to the universe. There isn't any sense in describing anything unless you use matter and energy to describe it. And what I said earlier, the physical laws, which are, again, the physical laws which emerge from the universe are descriptions of how matter and energy interact with each other. So to me, matter and energy interacting with each other always has been around since the dawn of time. And the way in which they interact with each other creates a set of descriptions of what we call the fundamental constants of nature. Some of those happen to be sufficient to build a universe that has life, and others are not.
Okay, let me just read some quotes here from Einstein in regards of that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Every scientist becomes convinced that the laws of nature manifest the existence of a spirit vastly superior to that of man. Everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that the spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of man. The divine reveals itself in the physical world. My God created laws. His universe is not ruled by wishful thinking, but by immutable laws. I want to know how God created this world. I want to know his thoughts. What I am really interested in knowing is whether God could have created the world in a different way. His firm belief in a superior mind that reveals itself in the world of experience represents my conception of God. My religiosity consists of a humble admiration of the infinitely superior spirit that superior reasoning power forms my idea of God. So you have here one of the most reputable and intelligent people dealing with these issues, immutable. And of course, we know that Einstein wasn't an atheist, and he believes precisely as I do that these physical laws, they manifest the Spirit of God, which implemented them and instantiated them in order to have a universe which is stable and which can exist for billions of years and able to host life.
Yeah, I'll wrap up by kind of clarifying that one point. Unfortunately, my time is running out. I'm on lunch break currently, so
okay.
I'll have to finish once I've made the statement.
Sure.
What's curious about that statement with Einstein particularly is Einstein professed a belief in what's generally called the Spinozian God.
Yes.
Spinoza's God, at least in Einstein's conception of it, was a God that's responsible for order and unity and mathematical beauty and elegance, things like symmetry and stuff of that nature. Einstein also made it very clear that the type of thing he believed in was not something that was transcendent. He believed that it was perfectly natural. What Einstein, according to some physicists that are here now, what Einstein is looking for in his writings in this case is he's looking for essentially the fundamental set of laws of physics. He's looking for what we would call a grand unified field theory. That would be a theory that is able to explain where these laws come from, why these values have the values they do, and explaining the relationship between those values. And that is something that is the holy grail of physics, but has not yet been achieved. So Einstein, when he was describing this, wasn't referring to anything and wasn't envisioning anything supernatural. He was envisioning a set of physical laws that potentially are able to describe the entirety of the universe and all the things which are responsible for and describing its behavior and descriptions.
Yeah, I'm not very versed in the peculiarities of Spinoza's God and what nature the God had that Einstein believed in. I think Joel is much better informed in that regard. Maybe he can give some input in regards of that. But I hope that I made my understanding clear. Immutable. Did you grasp what I mean by why I think that the physical laws and the physical universe, they are interdependent?
Yeah, I think the thing that we disagree on, I mean, so we disagreed first on the theory of time, and the notion of I have to get going.
Yeah. I will study further in regards of that. Okay. Okay, Mutable is gone. Anyway, you will listen maybe afterwards. Thanks for the chat. Does someone want to come in to have it continue the conversation? Otherwise, I will end the stream. The link is in the chat. Nobody? Hey, John.
Hey, Otangello, how you doing?
What's up?
Oh, not too much. Yeah, I've been listening, as you've probably seen in chat, I've been listening to your whole interaction with Immutable.
Okay.
Uh,
What were your thoughts?
well, I mean, I thought it was interesting, but it was just yet another reiteration of the same standard talking points that don't even remotely come close to accounting for the ultimate conundrums. And I mean, to me, at this point, it's either human. The real question is either humans have the capacity to identify something that is designed and therefore reach a conclusion that a designer is required, or you just need to claim humans do not have the capacity to determine this one way or the other, and we just need to stop looking.
Yeah.
I mean, I get so annoyed, like when you were bringing up the whole aspect of identifying something from order, like you guys were talking about order. And it's like, so in any other context, Immutable, you can determine if something has order or does not have order, except in the universe, even though you're using things that are part of that universe to determine whether or not they are ordered or disordered. Like, I don't. To me, it's just like, what are we even doing? Like, what is the point of the? I'm talking about with the folks like Immutable. I mean, I have personally observed on atheist channels, the ones that are not quite as like rigidly refusing to accept any kind of design premise. They have even like told Immutable that his arguments are dumb, and that he needs to stop going down these thought processes, and we got to come up with something new. And he just continues to double down on them.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, I mean, in regards of the physical laws, they always come up with excuse. Well, they are just described. We just discovered them. We described them, but they have not been prescribed. They have not been instantiated. And I mean, that is just simply not true.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and you guys were kind of touching on this to an extent, but I mean, you were with chess and everything. It's like, so in every other possible instance, you readily accept that intelligent agency is required to create governing rules in every other instance except this one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's just what I am doing, John, is basically exposing the irrationality and deflection of someone which denies this very obvious fact.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. Like, I don't know if you saw Dillahunty versus Jordan Peterson. But Dillahunty tried to he tried to claim that the rules of chess and that the logic you're playing out, that he tried to claim that doesn't imply, in terms of chess, wouldn't apply the inference of intelligent agency. And I'm just like, what? I'm like, okay, so, and here's what it really boils down to for me. And this is what I don't know if you saw my cracks in the comment section, but I'm joking about, like, I mean, I'm joking and also being somewhat serious about, like, okay, if you don't think you have the intellectual capacity to make these determinations, then stop trying to make determinations. Just stop. Because for me, what it boils down to is, if I could be put in an instance out in the middle of, let's say I have my brain wiped and I'm dropped off in the middle of a desert. I also have zero experiential perspective. I come across a knife, a bottle of freaking water, and a tent. I've never, because my brain has been wiped. I do not know what these things are. However, is it extraordinarily likely that I would come to the conclusion that something had created this? I mean, unless the atheists are willing to claim that no, as an intelligent agent themselves, you couldn't come to that conclusion, then what is I mean, unless you're going to say that, then the whole argument about like we just can't know in terms of the universe and like how does God exist, and we would not know. Let's say we're the last man on Earth in this instance, brains wiped, and jumped out there with some survival gear, and then the end of the world happens. So you're never going to interact with another human. Are you still going to come to the conclusion that there was an intelligent agent that existed prior to you, based on your observations of the rest of the world? I mean, it's so frustrating.
Yeah, it is, but it is difficult because we are leading not only with issues of rationality, but also with the emotional aspect. And people, they are so ingrained in their preconception that God is evil, in special the Christian God or the God of the Bible, that they reject him already on that level, and then they will try to justify what they already established, that they don't want to be true, and they try to justify it by showing what happens in the natural world, and then they want to say either that we cannot rationally infer that there is a creator, or they want to claim that evolution and natural processes are sufficient to explain everything. Or what the new atheists do is just saying, well, we don't make any claim, we just reject yours, which is basically willful ignorance fully displayed.
Oh, agreed 100%. I mean, that one to me, honestly, is additional reason to say, okay, if you're not smart enough to reach a conclusion, stop trying to convince everybody that I'm wrong. Like, you're literally admitting you don't have the capacity to know. So stop telling everybody else that they're also too stupid just because you are. And I mean, obviously, in the kind of, because some of these people are, not exactly, they're not mentally incompetent. But if you're going to make that claim, you are implying that you're incompetent. And
what astounds me, John, is like, let's take the Abiogenesis researcher. I will not mention his name, but you know who I mean. So somebody that has the intellectual capacity to understand how a ribosome works, and studies complex scientific topics for years. And I did send that last email, which you received as well, which I think is a fantastic exemplification of how irrational it is to believe that the genetic code and the information stored in genes could emerge randomly. And the illustration which I made is that if you see on the sky written, "Jesus loves you," could that happen by mere accident without anyone have written that? And that would be the same as to say that natural random forces created the genetic code and used it, then they used that language to write the genetical information to make proteins and to make life. I mean, this is so irrational to the extreme. And it has been, with that example, it has been illustrated so clearly why that is so irrational. And nobody of that bunch of people to whom I did send these emails, they replied and agreed with me. So what does that demonstrate? It demonstrates they clearly know that we are right in what we are proposing, but they do not want it except based on emotional reasons.
I would agree 100%. And I tell you something that further proves your point. So the after show I had after the debate the other night, way into the evening. I don't know if you probably didn't see this. You know how this, the Dilettantes and everybody, they all claim, I'll believe if God comes and shows himself to me. Well, it got into a whole deal. I said, okay, fine. Would you believe that God exists if a entity, came in front of you and said, I am God, and then said, I'm going to prove to you that I am God, and then proceeded to say, let's go to the top of Mount Everest, and instantly you teleported to Mount Everest. And then let me show you Mars, and you teleported to Mars, and extrapolate that out. Then oh, I would think that was a trick. Okay, fine. So now you're in the middle of a field, and it's you and a person who's handicapped and has, it's Stephen Hawking. And the individual in question says, Stephen Hawking, stand up. And before your very eyes, you watched muscle fibers form, like the muscles expand and reconstruct. And then Stephen Hawking steps out of his, like, all of the aspects of the multiple sclerosis that he had vanished, and he stands up out of his wheelchair. Would you then believe that entity was God? Well, no, I think it was probably some kind of an illusion. I'm like, okay, fine. So now you're all standing in the middle of a field. Everybody is completely buck naked. There is nothing. There is no sleeves to hide behind. We verified that there is no, you're not wearing a virtual reality headset. And now he says, stand up and walk. And again, you observe all this stuff, reconstruct in real time and stand up. Would you believe? Well, that might be start to believe. Okay, fine. Now there's a bucket of water, and it says, okay, take the cup and take a sip, and you do, and it's wine. Would you now agree that that's evidence that this is God? Anyway, long story short, I went down this rabbit hole with like all these different examples, and still said no, that would not prove that God exists. And I'm like, okay. Well, at this point, if you're going to claim that the only way you would believe is if God stood in front of you, but then in the instance in which we talk about how God is standing in front of you and doing exactly what you demand, he come down and show you that can be done because he is God, and you still will claim that that's not God and God does not exist, then there is no hope for you. You live in a fantasyland denial.
Yeah. I think you are restreaming the stream and it is echoing. Can you put down the volume, John? Yeah.
So was it giving you an echo?
Let's see if it continues. I'll tell you.
Okay. I'm using my phone right now.
Mm-hmm.
That may be the problem. But anyway, the long story short, the point I was making is just, if you're going to make an argument and say this is the only way that I would accept God, and then in this hypothetical scenario where what you demand happens, you still deny that God exists, then what's the point of even having these conversations?
Yeah, and I think the same applies. I have still echo, but it's not from my side, John. Let me just remove that here. So The same is with Matt Dillahunty. When you ask him, hey, what would convince you? Then he says, oh, I don't know, but God knows. And he can make that I believe. I mean, how do you want to discuss with someone like that when he doesn't even know what kind of burden of proof that would convince him?
Yeah, there absolutely is nothing. It's,
you know, and a very general problem which I see, John, is that many atheists, they have not established a sound epistemological framework upon which they can investigate origins. I mean, how many times have you also seen atheists asking us to demonstrate God existence? And that, I mean, these are just stupid demands, which everyone knows that we cannot provide empirical proofs of God's existence. If that would be the case, then nobody would be an atheist, or everyone would know that God exists, and end of discussion. So that kind of burden of proof is just it's either based on stupidity, or what I think is that it's based on a faulty lack of education and understanding how you actually make a consistent investigation based on a consistent epistemological framework. And that has to be established first. And many atheists
case in point.
Go ahead.
Case in point today, immutable is totally fine with virtual particles and quantum fields being eternal and requiring no first cause. He's totally fine with them needing no first cause, but is adamantly against a first mover and an uncaused cause.
And do you know what happens when I will investigate beat time, which Leo claimed that it is a proven fact that time is tenseless? I will investigate this. I make a bet with you, John, when I have a compelling answer and eventually refute that claim. Then up to then he will have another reason to say no, but that explains God away. God is not necessary. Say they will just move goalposts.
It is the number one tactic of the atheist. Whenever they get pinned, just open an escape hatch and then claim that you the new finishing line is now another mile down the street.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Erica was at your after show last night?
She was, yeah.
Yeah, I did send an email to her and to SFT. I've sent her an email and said to her, Erica, would you like to have a debate on any channel about evolution or abiogenesis? And even yesterday night, I met her and I said, hey, let's have a chat about the origin of information. And I did send you an email, you didn't reply, and said, oh, I didn't see it. But then I left my email in the chat and she didn't contact me. So she is running.
Well, Erica does not understand information. That was readily admitted. I mean, she admitted it in my debate with her. And then she then claimed to go and do all this research that debunked my information and programming and, logic rules and all that kind of stuff, arguments. But then, ironically, the other night, she basically didn't bring that up at all. It's like, yeah, if you actually did go and do some research, which she may have done, but you and I both know that if she actually went and did research, she ran into the exact same things that we have, which showcase how even staunch atheist academics realize that the foundation of the arguments that you and I make are true in relation to the existence of the information. It's not metaphor, it's not analogy, it's literal.
Yeah.
And I think the few atheists who actually do go and look, the reason they just run away so hard on those topics is they realize they actually can't defend them.
Well, I think that is the true reason why Matt Dillahunty refused to debate you. He must have seen some of your debates and he knows that he has absolutely no education in biology and biochemistry and information theory and so forth. And so he figured out if he would debate you, then he would lose badly, as all other opponents have debating you. And I mean, it is a good tactic. If you don't want to lose your face, just refuse to have a debate. He was actually smarter than Godless Engineer, which had the debate. Nonetheless, knowing that he had absolutely no clue about the topic, he demonstrated then. And on top of that, at the end, he thought that he won the debate. I mean, how how stupid is that, John?
Well, I guess if you force yourself to live in an ignorant state, then you can always convince yourself that the other person lost. You just don't, because you just don't recognize you didn't understand what they were saying, therefore it mustn't be true.
Yeah, I had another debate with John Gleason, and he didn't publish it. It remained private. And in the end, about after an hour or so, he said, "Hey, I'm hungry. I want to go eat pizza." And I said, "Okay." And he didn't accept to publish the debate, but he got frustrated at the end because, I mean, I really like to use analogies because they make our case very, very clear, and you cannot deny it. You know.
Well, I mean, as you know, even better than I do, with ribosomes, you are dealing with a 3D printer. Like, there is no way around this. It is a 3D printer. And now that humans also have 3D printing technology, the premise that a nano scale 3D printer can create itself. I mean, when you think, for me anyway, when you think about that from a comparison perspective, like, that's just stupid to even try and make that argument that could happen. Like, so you're claiming that the 3D printer printed itself. That's what you're claiming, and in the and you're claiming that the software that's being executed in the 3D printer also created itself. And you're creating the hardware that contains the software and the program that creates the software that enables the 3D printing process to occur. You're claiming that all created itself. I mean, that's what we're getting into at this point. And
I mean, John,
unless you're willing to claim that the 3D printer can create itself, you have no escape. Like, you got nothing.
I mean, John, that my whole interaction with Dimiter, for me, it was extremely educational because I dwelt deeper into the ribosome to understand its inner workings. And science has, in the last 2 or 3 years, made enormous progress to unravel its inner workings. And I mean, you have read what I have written about it, and you also have given me good information and motivation to look deeper into it. And the more that I have investigated this and understood how complex the ribosome is, and that it is a literal factory and on the highest order of complexity and sophistication, with inner signaling pathways, with error check networks, with stop on demand when something goes wrong on the fly, and so forth. And while I was understanding and reading about this, I was also interacting with Dimiter, and then I was thinking more and more, wow, it is incredible how at what extent that those that advocate for materialism, at what extent that they have to go to promote what they believe, and how irrational that it is. It is just incredible.
Well, and I think a further exemplification of your point, Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal, I had a direct interaction with him where he insisted there were no error correction or safety mechanism protocols in the ribosome. I mean, he adamantly insisted that was the case.
Do you want me to send you the link? You show it to him. I've counted 13 different error check and repair mechanisms, and they are all over distributed. Even in the tRNA synthetases, there are these error check mechanisms, and tRNA synthetases, they have inner signaling pathways inside of the protein, and they interact with the ribosome, and even signaling and control from outside of the ribosome is in place. Hey, can you imagine that? That is just crazy.
Well, I agree, and that's the thing to me. I'm like, this is a PhD who claims I don't know what I'm talking about, and
well,
is also
maybe it's not his field, but before he claims that
right,
there are no
well,
error
I agree with
repair mechanisms, he should investigate it and inform himself and do what I did today. If I don't have an understanding of tenseless time and of p-time theory and so forth, then I don't pretend to know it. I go and learn about it, and when I have a grasp, then I will be willing to debate it. But making a claim without knowing about this, I mean, that is just
right. But that's the thing. I think he actually does think he knows, because it's as you were just talking about, in the last several years, just in the last several years, the discoveries of many of these inner workings has reached a point where they cannot be, ignored, right? If you have the knowledge, right? If you actually go and look. But a lot of this stuff was not known to the extent that it is now, probably even a decade ago when he was getting his PhD, or even doing his undergrad, right? Before he went into virology and such. So, but the thing for me, and this, where I'm going with this, is why so many people seem ready to believe the materialism, is individuals like Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal, in many instances, for many, many people that are coming out of Rutgers University, he has been teaching the only class on biology that they're going to take. So they're going to they're getting their degree, and their only exposure to some of these fundamentals is coming from somebody who doesn't even know what the hell they're talking about on something like the ribosome. And not only does he not know, insists that it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, that's crazy. That's science denial. That is really that is science denial. I mean, hey, well, what shall I say?
Well, what I find so funny about that is, after my argument with him about the ribosome, that was right after that when he challenged me to come do his evolutionary biology 101 quiz. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. You're going to sit here and adamantly argue that I don't know what I'm talking about when I've literally read papers on the subject where this is defined. And then you're going to make the public argument that I don't know what I'm talking about in relation to evolutionary theory, when you don't even understand how, or refuse to accept how key components of the biological system work. I mean, it's just, it really, I get entertainment and also frustration out of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I am reading right now The Secret Language of Cells from Jon Liev, and this guy has fantastic information. And if you want, I can send you the link afterwards. You can download the book and read it as well. And the more that we study, the more we are getting flabbergasted by what science is unraveling right now in regards, special of communication in the brain. And I mean, I didn't know, for example, John, that when there is an inflammation or something like that, it's not just a few blood cells of the immune system which are recruited to solve the problem, but there are many different cells involved in this. And a white blood cell knows exactly the position where it has to go, and it stops in the body exactly at the right place. And it is like it has a map, in a literal sense, a map where it knows where the information takes happens and where it has to go. So that's an inner GPS system. And cells, they know exactly their location all the time, where they are, if they are at the right place, and if they are not, how they have to move into the body to get where they belong, and all based on information. And now, how does all these kind of information systems emerge by evolution? And the brain uses not just one kind of signaling, but many different ones, and they interact with each other. How do you explain this by evolutionary mechanisms? I think we have come to the verge of knowing enough to say that anyone that still proposes evolution is just simply in a denial state and total irrationality.
Agreed. Lena, thanks for joining us. I've never actually been able to interact with you other than in chat. How are you doing?
Fine. Thanks, John. It
Yes,
is so that I normally do not want to harass you with my accent.
No problem. No worries. I have also my accent, so.
Yes, but your accent is much better.
Well, don't worry. That's no problem.
And people normally, how to say, find it difficult to understand what I mean.
Well, we can understand you well. But I think you have also the live stream, the volume on. Eventually, you can just mute it. Otherwise, we have echo.
Is it now better?
Yes.
Okay.
Now
Great.
it's gone. Okay.
Yes. I have listened to the after show on John's channel. And John, have you heard Erica? She claimed about abiogenesis that there was no one trial, but there were literally trillions upon trillions of tornadoes and trillions upon trillions of junkyards. And there were trillions of trials. So I think that next they will just start claiming that the probability of abiogenesis is 1.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I know what you're talking about. And she brought that up, and the counterpoint I was making to her is because I've heard that argument before, and it's a couple of the atheist websites have talked about this, and they try to use that excuse. But what they refuse to, either they're incapable of, or they refuse to consider the fact that the improbability is so great that they're in the timeline that they're referring to, there isn't enough literal atomic actions that have taken place in order to account for the improbability. So it doesn't matter that there's all these different simultaneous, from their worldview, all these different simultaneous trials going on. There still aren't enough to account for the improbability. And beyond that, you still have to account for the next step. So even if you account for one, you have to have another component that's also being built at the same time, and it has to be in the exact geographic proximity to the other one in order for them to combine.
Correct.
So you just keep going further down the rabbit hole, and it's to me, for the atheist, I'm like, you really want to keep trying to explain all of these additional components when you can't even explain one of them, and you've got millions to go? It's comical at this point.
Yeah, I've left the comment here at SFT's channel where he reproduces Erica's interaction, and she claimed inorganic and organic chemicals to a degree self-organize. We see this, and then she continues. And this is, of course, hogwash and complete nonsense, which I also pointed out to Immutable Destiny today and showed him the paper of Steve Benner in 2012. And he states it very clearly that in the asphalt paradox, there are 0 confirmed observations where replication involving replicable imperfections, the evolution emerged spontaneously from a devolving chemical system. I mean, chemicals, they devolve, they do not complexify. And
Well, and,
this
and,
is what,
and that logic and what you're saying there, Otangello, applies to the artificially created self-replicating RNA strands. Oh, cool. If you create one that's big enough artificially using, ironically, using pre-existing enzymes, which I think is funny. But even if you create this artificial strand that can replicate, you still run into the fact that it always devolves rather than evolves. Like every single observed instance, it reduces rather than increases. So, I mean, if you're going to continue to rely on the RNA world hypothesis when you have observed evidence that the RNA world hypothesis does not work, even if you can reach the state, which all the evidence shows you can't, even if you could reach this state of self-replication, you still end up back at 0 every time.
But that self-replication was so raped from my point of view. It was forced. It didn't occur without interference, as far as I could understand from an interview with Dr. Stadler. Not this one, but the previous one. So it was not that self-replication was not how to say. I cannot describe it in details because I do not understand exactly the chemical process, but it was really forced. So it is an exaggeration to claim that they have achieved a self-replication in the lab. It is an exaggeration. I think so.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, you have to have all of the appropriate. There's I'm trying to remember where I saw this, but there's a whole lecture that was done by. I actually kind of referenced this to Erica, but at the Chemical Evolution Center Origin of Life Research Lab in Atlanta, a guy that had just left there, he did an interview a couple months ago. He's an atheist, okay, and he went into that whole problem of how it wasn't actually plausible to reach a quote Darwinian evolutionary state because of the things that you're referring to, of like it's just not possible to get to that point, even if what we're doing isn't forced and not really a natural state. But the folks like Erica and many others, YouTube atheists, they're so desperate to find anything they can try and use that supports their worldview. They either don't read beyond the abstract in the title of a paper, or if they do, they just deny what is actually stated by the researcher.
No, they will always deny, John. Always, they will always come back to the multiverse religion, or to claims like there is no consciousness, or there is only the illusion of consciousness. We are just how to say, a collection of materials and chemical processes, and so on and so on. They will always go and claim make such ridiculous, retarded claims. Always. I don't know if you have watched this debate between Dr. Tour and Lee. I don't remember the last name.
Lee Cronin.
Yes. That was ridiculous. They tried to redefine life. He claims that he's even not conscious, and so on and so on. Consciousness.
Well, they try to redefine life to a point when they say that even a self-replicating RNA molecule is live.
Or even crystals and minerals are alive, or something like that.
Yeah, that's why it is important that right in the beginning of an abiogenesis debate, we actually elucidate what we mean by life. And of course, then there are many things that must be fully established, like self-replication, nutrition, waste disposal, energy production, the making of the basic materials of the building blocks, and metabolism and information generation and signaling and homeostasis. All that has to be in place in order for self-replication to start. And I think there is no reason to start with less than the simplest self-replicating life forms that we know of. And as I have stated many times before, the example must be a free living cell. It cannot be a pathogen, which is a host of other life forms, because they were not extant prebiotically. And then you
Hold on one sec, guys, as we try to find where we were. Let's see.
Lee, I don't remember the last name.
Lee Cronin.
Yes, that was ridiculous. They tried to redefine life. He claims that he's even not conscious, and so on and so on. Consciousness.
Well, they try to redefine life to a point when they say that even a self-replicating RNA molecule is life.
Or even crystals and minerals are alive, or something like that.
Yeah, that's why it is important that right in the beginning of an abiogenesis debate, we actually elucidate what we mean by life. And of course, then there are many things that must be fully established, like self-replication, nutrition, waste disposal, energy production, the making of the basic materials of the building blocks, and metabolism and information generation and signaling and homeostasis. All that has to be in place in order for self-replication to start. And I think there is no reason to start with less than the simplest self-replicating life forms that we know of. And as I have stated many times before, the example must be a free living cell. It cannot be a pathogen, which is a host of other life forms, because they were not extant prebiotically. And then you, of course, you will have to raise the threshold of what is not alive and what is life enormously, and to come to the point where you have to confess that one of the smallest living examples would be a bacteria like Pelagibacter ubique, which I mentioned many times already. And that has a genome of 1.3 million nucleotides. Now, if you tell that an atheist, then of course, or a proponent of abiogenesis, then he will immediately deny this and say, "Oh, no, 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 no! It can start much simpler," but that's not true.
Yes, but if they agree to start with a very simple bacteria, they are done at the very beginning of the debate.
Yeah, but that's the truth. That's the truth, and it is good that we make it very clearly. In one of the recent debates that I had, they asked me, "Well, do you think that the cell is irreducibly complex?" And I said, "Yes, of course it is." And then they just made an expression of ridiculing that what I said was ridiculous, but that's the evidence. The cell is irreducibly complex. It cannot emerge by a stepwise down-up process.
Well, I think this applies to the whole simpler. Supposedly, there was a much simpler version of the ribosome that somehow evolved, and all we need is 4 stabilizer proteins and some RNA. And it's like, okay, well, let's go look at those supposedly not that complicated stabilizer proteins that you need. Well, turns out that the smallest one is 297 amino acids in length. That's the smallest one. But they recognize you have to have all 4 in order for the stabilization that they claim has to be you only have to have this stabilization, you only have to have these 4 proteins, but you can't explain how the proteins existed or come into existence without the ribosome. But somehow it's reasonable to conclude that somehow they came into existence and now we exist.
Yeah.
But if you point out to these issues, then they will bring the Dova case into the conversation, and in order to shut you up regarding the irreducible complexity, or they will just claim that this is an argument of personal incredulity, and so on and so on. This is a never ending story. They will never ever they will never ever accept a different point of view.
That's why we always say that this is not a problem of science or of reasoning. It is a problem, a spiritual problem. People, they do not want to have God in their life, so they suppress the evidence in order to substantiate what they want to be true. That is what we are fighting against.
This is definitely not a science issue. It is not about science here. It is a worldview, and it is just like that. And John, sorry, you wanted to say something.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Erica has mentioned something that I think that I have heard previously in a debate between Otangello and Immutable. It is about the thermodynamics issue. Now they claim that life, the long-term effect of life is increase of entropy. Have you heard that argument of Erica during the after show?
I would have to hear it. I've not heard it. I would have to know what she exactly said.
She was talking about the stabilization of chemical reactions. This was also what Immutable was talking about once on your channel, Otangello.
Oh, you're talking about the claim that chemicals try to self-order and try to come into an orderly state through reactions.
I would like to share here this table here. Okay. You have here ribose. That the green circle here is the form of ribose which is used in life to make RNA. That's the backbone of RNA. Okay. Now you can have all these forms which are crossed in red. These are all also possible forms of ribose, and they are not used in life. And the one which is used is the one which is the most unstable one. So the question is, of course, how do you select the right one which actually is functional? From so many different conformations that are possible, if there was no selection process occurring prebiotically. This is a very big problem for abiogenesis. And I mean, that kind of argumentation which Erika is making, it is very common. And that is what we have an example for as pseudoscience. When you make an argument, scientific argument, which is very superficial, but does not actually go into the core of the problems. And we have to demonstrate that what I am showing here, this is the core of the problem. You have many different kinds of ribose available prebiotically, and only one form is used. There was no selection process there. This already would be, for an honest thinker, okay and enough to say, oh, okay, that is evidence that abiogenesis by unguided means is not possible. But they will just overlook it and then say, oh, somehow science will find out how that happened. And so they are using the materialism of the gaps argument.
Linus, one of the funniest things that Erica claimed in the after show was that the chirality problem has been solved.
Yeah, do you know why? Because Otangello, could it be that she had some conversations with this sound of speed of sound of gravity team about Kunnev's hypothesis? Because Kunnev, he's actually Kunnev. Kunnev claims that his case has solved the chirality problem, the homochirality problem.
I had also a chat. I forgot the guy's name now on my channel, and he said, well, there were, of course, racemic left and right-handed amino acids floating around, but in the catenation, just the left-handed ones were used. But that is, of course, a hogwash claim, because amino acids, they can be alpha, beta, and so forth. They can have two members. They can have one member, and they can bond in very different ways, also in the side chains, and that has to be directed in a very precise fashion and order. And the mechanism to do so, we know that in cells it's the ribosome, which has fantastic, super sophisticated mechanisms to bring the two amino acids in the precisely correct position together in order to promote the correct reaction. And that reaction, that bonding reaction, is very, very complex and very precise and very sophisticated. And all this was simply not extant prebiotically. So they are just hand-waving away the problem and saying, oh, it's happening and so forth. But in reality, they do not have a compelling explanation. It is pseudoscientific nonsense which they are proposing.
John, have we asked her what she meant about this solution of the problem? Of that claim about the solution of the homochirality? Oh, John has
Oh,
left.
yeah, and that is also the problem of ribose, which is only right-handed. So we have the problem of ribose and amino acids, and we know that in life the transamination reaction occurs. There are specific enzymes to do the selection, and if a wrong one is incorporated, then it's ejected from the ribosome, it's sorted out. And all these mechanisms, of course, they were not available prebiotically. So it's a huge problem. They have no solution on that. And only who actually doesn't understand the science claims that it has been solved, but it has definitely not been solved. Quite in the contrary.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, sorry, I'm on my phone and it froze on me. I had to refresh. Yeah, I started to question you on it and just then kind of just let it go because in the after show, let other people talk. But yeah, I mean, I agree with what Otangello said. I mean, they keep claiming they've answered the questions, but then if you actually go and look, they haven't solved the problem. And I mean, all they come up with is very, multi-layered hypotheticals. And I'm sorry, but if your argument is that if this and 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 this, ad nauseum or ad infinitum occur, then this is possible. If that's going to be your claim, what's the point? You're not actually looking for a logical, plausible, or probable answer to a question. You're only looking for am I creative enough to come up with enough hypothetical scenarios in which anything is possible?
Exactly.
And that applies, in my opinion, to a lot of the phylogenetic trees and such. I mean, you're literally arguing that, they're literally coming up with algorithms to say, hey, let's figure out how many things would have to change in order for this to turn into that. That's literally what they're doing. And then claiming, well, because I came up with an algorithm that says this can become that, I'm going to say that proves beyond all doubt that even though the process by which this would have to occur would result in death, somehow it did occur and things didn't die. I mean, that's what we're getting into with, on the biological evolution side of the equation. And I'm sorry, I can come up with an algorithm that can solve anything. I mean, from a hypothetical perspective, that does not make it even remotely close to reality.
Correct. And this is, first of all, back to the topic about Erica and her claim that we have solved that problem. Maybe she has heard about this hypothesis of bridge enzymes, that they solve the problem, and now she claims that we have solved the problem. That's all.
Well, she can claim whatever she wants. I mean, that doesn't mean it's plausible.
Yes, Otangello, but once people have heard from her or from some other people that the problem has been solved, they then start claiming and repeating that this problem has been solved. For even sometimes even creationists think that some problem has been solved. For example, during the after show, there was a new person there that I don't know, Tony. Tony claimed, or he thought that we have managed to create a cell in a lab because atheists, they just repeat it constantly and people start believing it.
Yeah, let me just respond, John.
Yeah.
Yes, that is the problem, Lena, that many people, they do not understand the science and they are just parroting what they hear say. I've seen that at Speech Channel when I had all this interaction with Dimiter, and then there was one guy, he said, oh, Dimiter, he just destroyed Otangello, what Otangello said. And I asked him, do you even understand what we were talking about? And he had absolutely no understanding. So many people, they are just going with hearsay and, oh, if X says it, it must be true. And we see that very, very often happening. So people, they want just to confirm what they already believe, and if there is an authority which confirms what they already believe, then they say, oh, X is saying that what I believe is true, so it must be true, and they don't understand it. That is very common.
99% of people do not understand abiogenesis and evolution, and they believe it. And I know it, you know, in my country, because I was born in a communist country. In our school books, it was literally stated that abiogenesis is proven. I thought, when I was a child, I thought that there is no problem whatsoever to create life in a lab.
I can imagine that. Yeah, I can imagine that.
It was many years later, I got to know that it is just not true what we have learned at school.
Well,
so
what I am learning, Lena, is the more that I dig deeper into the scientific stuff regarding how a cell operates, the more I am coming to the understanding that we are not grasping the size and hugeness of the problem. And I've stated it several times. There are, for example, import protein channels on the cell membrane, and they are designed to import only one specific rare earth metal or iron or sulfur and so forth. And iron is absolutely life essential. And this import channel has a sequence of amino acids which has a high affinity to recognize the chelated iron on the surface of the cell membrane, and then it binds it and imports it inside to the cell. Now, if that sequence, and they have done knockout experiments, if that amino acid sequence is not correct, then the protein cannot recognize the iron. It is not imported into the cell, and the cell without iron cannot produce the proteins which use iron sulfur cofactors, which are life essential, and then you cannot have life. So what I want to say with this is that the correctness is enormous. There are so many things which must be just right, and if just a sequence of a few amino acids isn't correct and isn't there, you cannot import iron and you have no life. And this is a tiny example, and you can go on with hundreds or even thousands of proteins which are all life essential, and each one of those must be designed correctly. And if it's not, there is no life.
Yes, Otangello, but they would rather accept that some alien beings have created us instead of God.
Of course. I mean, even Dawkins came up with that hypothesis when he was hard-pressed to answer about the origin of life. And he said, well, it's possible that some aliens seeded life on Earth, maybe panspermia. We just don't know yet. But it doesn't come into his mind that eventually the best explanation is a creator.
What I wanted to ask you, because I have missed the beginning of the discussion with Immutable, did he claim that there was time prior the creation of the universe, or there was no time prior the creation of the universe?
Well, he claimed that the quantum vacuum had no beginning, and it was simply there. So basically, a an eternal quantum state, which then somehow triggered the Big Bang. And that's when I asked him, well, but if there was time, then you cannot have it eternally. And then he came up with that tenseless time, to which I have so far no answer because I've not studied the topic.
So he claimed that there were quantum fluctuations prior the beginning of the universe. This is a fluctuation of the space-time, which means that there was time prior the beginning of the universe.
Yes, that's true. And that's precisely why I say that if there was time, there had to be a beginning. And if you have a beginning, you need to have a beginner. So then he came up with that B theory and tenseless time and so forth. So since I'm not qualified to go into that and give a response, so I'm leaving that as an open question for now.
Yeah, I understand. But one point here, the problem is that we do not really know what happened back then. So it is, how to say, we cannot claim that there were these quantum fluctuations, or there was time, or there was no time. That is the problem. We cannot claim with certainty what happened. And this, even Leophilius is ready to he claims that we really don't know what happened. So no matter what we claim, this claim won't be correct.
That is a problem when we come to the bottom of the discussion. In many cases, atheists, they will just resort to the ignorance claim and say, oh, we just don't know, and leave it by that. And of course, if you say we don't know, then God isn't an option either.
Yeah, for them. Yeah. But about this tenseless time, I think that Salvador, because I have sent him some materials, that he is also a little bit, he dived into the topic a little bit.
Okay.
So you can maybe have a conversation with him offline about that. He can because he has, for example, helped me to understand the speed of light, why science claims that it is a constant. I have understood the position of science, the how to say, what is the theory. I don't know if it is true, but I have understood the theory at least.
Yeah, I am not so versed into these questions, so I have to dig a little bit deeper and make some investigation and see if I can advance my understanding on these topics.
What I can tell you, biology is more accessible than in comparison to these topics. But these topics are also, you do not need a lot of time to grasp them, from my point of view.
Yeah, I mean, the science papers, they use always a lot of math, of formulas, and I am very bad in that. I hate to even to try to understand them, so I'm not going even there. But the concepts, they can be grasped. I agree with you.
Yeah, and in the materials that I want to send you, there isn't even one equation. So Carlo Rovelli, he explains everything with words without using mathematical equations.
Okay.
So, but the topic is confusing. Nevertheless, it's very confusing, and it's on the borderline to science fiction from my point of view.
Yeah, I mean, Leo claimed that the tenseless time has been proven empirically, and that's what I will investigate this.
No.
Take some time to see what is. I know that William Craig, he holds to the A theory of time, that time is tense, and I will try to find some adequate answers to these issues and understand it better, what it is all about.
And Salvador could also help with that topic because he understands physics much better than the others. But I really don't think that time tenseless, that time is tenseless. That has been proven. How proven?
Yeah,
They claim that it is an illusion. So how can you prove that?
yeah, I will write Salvador and ask him if he has some material, some science papers or books or whatever on this topic to clarify that, in order to have an informed answer to it, if it is really a consistent scenario, if it's backed up by science, by experiments, or if it's just something theoretical and hypothesized.
It is a hypothesis. The same with these time fluctuations at the beginning, prior to the beginning of the universe. I suppose that Immutable has read this book of Lawrence Krauss, Universe from Nothing.
Yeah. That is the from where that these ideas started, and it is incredible how people swallow this kind of nonsense easily without giving a second thought. But when it comes to God, then everything is done to reject the proposal.
But that book and the concept of the book has been really intensively criticized by other scientists. So it is not that he has written it and we need to immediately accept it, but they do.
Many accept it, but as you've said, not only we from our side have criticized it, but also many secular scientists. They have there are good reasons to reject these ideas. And I mean, Krauss has gone to the extent to claim that absolutely nothing could create something, and that is, of course, utmost irrational.
I think that he has taken this idea from Stephen Hawking, because Stephen Hawking has written this in I don't know if you have read his books, his stupid, totally retarded books, but there was a statement there that I think that
there is zero energy, that there is negative and positive energy, and that it cancels out.
No, the statement was because there are laws, as the law of gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing.
Yes, but he justifies it by claiming that there is negative energy and positive energy, and the sum of both is zero, and therefore there was nothing at the beginning. But of course, if you have debts at the bank and you have money on another bank, that state also has to be explained. How did it come to be that you had no money on the bank, and in the other bank you have money? So that's the same thing here. You have to explain why there was negative energy and positive energy. That state doesn't come just out of nothing.
But not only that, Otangello, he also claims that the law of gravity has existed prior to the beginning of the universe. Because there is a law of gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing.
Yeah, that is, of course, a complete nonsense. And
complete nonsense. How can a scientist who claims to be an atheist write this sentence. Completely retarded. Completely.
But it applies very well what I said many times. When there is scientist X says at the beginning, then whatever comes afterwards is swallowed because there is that sentence at the beginning that it was a scientist which made the claim. So it's of course a fallacy of authority. You cannot simply swallow and accept anything that comes from someone just because he is a scientist. And this is a classic example, of course.
Because this is Stephen Hawking, and everybody claims that he was a genius, and even religious people claim that he was a genius. But if you ask them what he has discovered, they cannot give you any answer because they have no idea. They only repeat that he was a genius.
Yeah, that applies to Lawrence Krauss. It applies to Richard Dawkins and to all these guys which are in or now or have been in the spotlight. I mean, it is very interesting that you see that people, they have absolutely no problem to believe whatever they say. They have no problem to believe that abiogenesis is true, or that macroevolution of primary speciation is true, or common ancestry. All these scientific claims, or the multiverse, or whatever. People, atheists, they have no problem to accept and believe all these proposals because they are supposedly to be scientific. But when it comes to God, then of course that's fairy tale, that is talking snakes, and that's unwarranted miracles, and they are making all kind of ridiculization of what the Bible says. So I come back to what we said before. The truth is that we are dealing with a spiritual and not a scientific problem when we deal with atheists.
And you know what, Andrew, when you point to the multiverse, that it is a religion, they say no, it is not a religion, but it is. Even this I don't know if you know her, Sabine Haselhofer.
Yes, she has a YouTube channel.
Correct. And even she claims that the multiverse is religion, and she's a secular scientist.
Well, the truth is that the entire materialistic worldview is a religion because it makes many claims which can only be accepted by faith. But since we are dealing with modern atheists, which are not strong but weak atheists, they will, of course, say, well, we make no claim. We just don't accept yours. So they can avoid all these issues. But when in the dialogue they come up, then they will stick to these explanations.
True. But therefore, we shall not get upset when they, how to say, that we cannot convince anybody.
No, I mean, if you start the conversation with an atheist with the hope that you will achieve something, then you start with the wrong premise. Let's say I've never done that, and I don't do it because in the end we have to leave it to God, to the Holy Spirit, which convinces people in regards of the truth. What we can do is we can plant a small seed in the heart of those that will listen. And it can be that God uses it in 5 years, in 10 years, after 50 years, we don't know, but it is planted there. So what we have to do is to obey, to do our job, to be light in a world which dwells darkness, and then be satisfied when we are doing what God is demanding us to do, and leave the decision of our listeners if they want to listen or not. Just leave it to them.
Yes, and I think that it is completely legitimate to say that we don't know, and it is completely legitimate also to confess that we have not solved some problems. Because I have seen recently that on David Neff's channel, it was a short video about the heat problem, and he has asked if we have solved it. We have not solved it, but it's also okay. That does not mean that we are not going to solve it in future.
We have many open issues as well, Lena. Lena, also in regards of the Bible, there are many things that seem contradictory or which we do not understand. And then it is completely fine to say, okay, we do not have an explanation in regards of this. Like in Joshua, where God stopped the day and it remained day for 2 days, for 48 hours. How did that happen? I mean, it seems from an astronomical viewpoint and scientific viewpoint absolutely impossible that this could happen. But it's in the Bible, so how do we explain it? And in these cases, I am fine also to say simply, well, I don't know. What's important is that you put everything on the balance and then you weight one proposal towards or compared to the other, and that the one worldview which has the best explanations in regards of the most questions, that's the one that someone should stick to. And I mean, there are some key points which cannot be denied, which are undoubtedly pointing to design as the absolutely certainly best explanation of our existence.
Yep, I agree with you totally.
Okay, Lena, I will finish our stream. It's already 2.5 hours. I think
Yes.
it was nice to talk to you, to John, to Immutable, and let's continue that another day.
Okay, thank you, Otangello. See you later.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.